Hey folks, I wanted to take a moment today while my car is in the shop and I'm not permitted to wait inside because of COVID. I wanted to take a moment and talk about Zoom fatigue, which is something that we are all hearing a lot about, and I think most of us are feeling a fair amount of as well. And I want to both put it in context and also give you some ideas about how to give yourself some relief from Zoom fatigue, maybe give your team relief from Zoom fatigue by sharing maybe this video or maybe just some of the thoughts that I'm going to share with you. A couple things about the context. Zoom fatigue is real, and it's not the whole picture. I think all of us are at a low point in our total resilience because of difficult time in history fatigue, 2020 fatigue, we could call it if you want, right? We've got an incredibly contentious political environment. We've got a very contentious social environment, and we've got this this coronavirus thing sweeping the world and changing our lifestyle profoundly. Everything that we took for granted, a lot of the things anyway, that we took for granted, we can no longer take for granted. We can't do the things that we liked to do. We can't go to the places that we like to go to. Anytime we're around people other than our family, we've got our faces covered. It is an I know we're all tired of hearing this word. It is an unprecedented time. And so, you know, if you think about resilience as a bucket full of water, and when we really start to be distressed when that bucket overflows, right? There's a question of how much water is getting poured into the bucket, and then there's also a question of how fast are we letting that bucket drain. And when the bucket drains, when the bucket of strain and stress drains and drains effectively, then there's an awful lot of water that we can take coming into the bucket and still be a-okay, still be on an even keel, still feel good, still feel energetic, still feel happy, still have a rosy outlook on life. And you know, the kinds of stuff that we used to do, going to the movies, going out to eat, that we used to do to help keep things drained, hanging out with friends, to keep the water flowing out of the bucket so that it doesn't overflow. All those things are limited now. And so for many of us, the drain is kind of clogged. Add to that the fact that we may be strained about our financial situations, our job security, what's going to happen in November when elections come, what's happening now in our political environment. All that is water coming into the bucket. And so you add on top of that Zoom, which is more difficult than a face-to-face meeting. Then Zoom fatigue starts to kick in because the drainage system isn't working terribly well. So we've got to put that in context. So one of the great things that we can do to relieve Zoom fatigue is to increase our resilience, to find ways of opening up those drains, and to find ways of diminishing the amount of water, that strain that's coming into the bucket in the first place. So for me, for example, I'm spending more time in the river that's in my backyard. I'm trying to exercise more than I was before, and I'm not doing this terribly well. I'm not keeping my drain open as well as I should, as well as I'd like to, and I'm going to be looking for more ways. And you know, while the weather holds, I'm having some socially distanced picnics with friends, and those things are things that are helping to keep the drain open so that strain is flowing through, stress is flowing through, and I'm less stressed. I've got a greater amount of resilience in general, so that the added strain of the Zoom meetings that I'm in is not as impactful, because there's more room in the bucket to take on that strain. There's more room in the bucket to take on that stress. So that's some contextual things to think about when it comes to Zoom fatigue. Excuse me. And so let's talk about some ways to reduce the amount of to reduce the amount of stress and strain that Zoom adds. In other words, how do we make Zoom meetings less fatiguing? And the answer is in part what we can do to make it less fatiguing on others, and then of course what we can ask our teams to do to make it less straining on us, on them, on the other people, clients, prospects, collaborators, that can help reduce the amount of strain that Zoom adds to our ecosystem in general. And a while ago I sent out an email to our newsletter, to our mailing list, about the importance of lighting and sound. And you know, when all this started, there were lots of guides that went around about how to have great lighting, about how to have good sound. What there wasn't a whole lot of is why, and why that's so important. And as a theater director and a film director, I can tell you that lighting and sound are subliminal, subconscious information centers. And what film and theater directors know how to do is to tap into your primitive brain and give you information in very subtle ways about the character that you're seeing on stage or the character that you're seeing in film. So for example, right, when in Halloween, we light ourselves from the bottom. If you put a flashlight under your face, that's an incredibly unnatural way of seeing a human face lit. Because the sun is above us. That's the way that we've evolved to expect to see light, is coming from a downward angle. And so that's just one example of the ways that we get messages about someone from light. And we look also to people's facial expressions to help us understand what they're thinking, what they're feeling, whether they're a threat or whether they are an ally, whether they are comfortable with us or uncomfortable with us, whether we need to be doing something to improve the relationship, whether the relationship is or is not under stress because we're reading their faces. And if I am not well lit, and I can, I can imagine right now you can see me pretty well because the sun is that way. And here's another thing that's stressful, right, is that the sun is occluded largely by all the smoke that we're having here in the Pacific Northwest. So that actually improves the lighting experience for you because the light is not that harsh on my face, which would send other signals to you. But I'm seeing so many people still, 6 months in on Zoom, I'm seeing people backlit, which makes people's faces, the details of their facial expressions are obliterated because they become silhouettes. If you're backlit on Zoom, you become a silhouette. And so people cannot read your facial expressions. And that creates a subliminal stress on anybody who's engaged in that conversation with you. Another thing that's causing strain and stress for people on Zoom is we've read that we should look into the camera. So we're looking into the camera and we also see ourselves over here on the side maybe, which provides some distraction. How do I look? How do I look? How do I look? But also, oh wait, I've got to look at everybody. I've got to look people in the eye because eye contact is important. I've read that we've got to look into the camera. And it's true that you do have to look into the camera to give people a sense of connectedness. It's not true that you need to stare into the camera 100% of the time, except that because we've been reading it, we expect that from ourselves and other people maybe expect it from us. So it's a great idea to set a different expectation, to say, hey folks, let's keep our cameras on. That way we can check in and do some of this body language and facial expression reading. And let's also give each other the grace of being able to look to the side, to look around the room as we would naturally in any meeting. And we'll keep coming back and checking in with the camera so that people know that we're paying attention. And also people are going to know that we're paying attention because we're nodding along, which by the way is something that I encourage. All the nonverbal cues that you can deliver, do deliver. Think of this as a part of your communication assignment. And that will help reduce the Zoom fatigue for other people. It may increase it slightly for you, especially while you're starting to build this as a habit, these nonverbal cues that you're giving people, you know, a little thumbs up, little nodding along, things of that nature. So you're helping to reduce the Zoom fatigue for others by providing them with some of those nonverbal cues. Another reason why Zoom is so fatiguing for people is that if you're the presenter, like this is happening for me right now, is that if here I am, I'm the presenter, I'm getting no feedback, and that is really difficult for people. And when someone is in a Zoom meeting and they're the one talking, everybody else, here's some of the conventional wisdom: if you're not the one talking, be on mute. And so everybody else is on mute. And so you're talking to people, you know who they are, and you're getting nothing back. You don't hear people breathing, you don't hear people saying, mm-hmm, you don't hear people laughing at your jokes. It is an incredibly disconcerting experience for most people to have, to be investing in a communication and getting absolutely nothing back. In fact, the most stressful thing for somebody in a job interview, for example, is to have the person opposite them who's interviewing them essentially have no affect, to have kind of a neutral facial expression, to have neutral reactions. It is less stressful for people in job interviews to have that person visibly and audibly disapprove, because then at least you know where you're at with that person, and that is a lot less stressful than not knowing where you're at. So here's the unconventional recommendation that I'm going to make to you to help reduce the amount of Zoom fatigue on your team, is to have the expectation be that everybody stay off mute unless there's some extenuating circumstance, like if there's a lawnmower going by outside and there is specific background noise that you want to help eliminate for people, then by all means go on mute while that noise is there. But the expectation, the standard is that people are off mute, and that way you can hear each other laugh at each other's jokes. You can hear each other say when somebody brings up a great point or when somebody has a great idea. This helps eliminate the sterility and the lack of kind of that subliminal feedback that we get when we are in a room in person with people. And so these are a couple of my thoughts for you about how to reduce Zoom fatigue. 1, build resilience by finding ways to reduce your overall stress and strain, and physical exercise, great sleep, right? All kinds of the usual resilience builders are there. And then having great sound, great video, that you're giving people a fantastic look at your face so that they can read your facial expressions, even the tiny little micro ones, and stay off mute so that you can hear each other, and so that also there's a lower barrier to replying, to giving short replies, to asking people clarifying questions. Surprisingly, just that little click to find that little red microphone and click on that and turn your microphone back on is a significant impediment and reduces the amount of back and forth that happens on Zoom, so that people feel like it is entirely up to them to hold up the conversation. And these are some things that you can do to help reduce Zoom fatigue in your life and in the lives of the people that you work with. And so I hope that this has been useful. I know that exercising these things in my Zoom life for the last 6 months has been incredibly useful to me, and I've gotten lots of great feedback and thank yous from other people that I've shared this with, so I wanted to share it again and share it more broadly. Thanks so much for listening, and if you have questions, if you have thoughts, of course, I want to hear them. So put them in the comments, shoot me a message, give me a call. We'd be happy to talk with you further. We'd be happy to work with your team, and happy week. Find some things to reduce your overall strain and build that resilience. We're gonna get through it one way or another.